The Singapore summit between President Trump and Kim Jong Un produced stunning and surprising pictures. But what about the substance? Did the two leaders resolve differences that could lead to a nuclear confrontation? Joining me here in Washington is Jack Reed, the top Democrat on the Senate Armed Services Committee. Senator, welcome back to Fox News Sunday.
Thanks, Chris.
President Trump says that North Korea is no longer a nuclear threat, his words, and on Friday he added this.
I have solved that problem. Now we're getting it memorialized and all, but that problem is largely solved.
Senator, your reaction?
North Korea is a nuclear threat. The president's statement was absolutely, in my view, preposterous. North Korea has between 20 and 60 nuclear weapons. They have missiles that they can deliver those weapons to Japan, South Korea, Guam. They have an intricate infrastructure of nuclear laboratories, testing facilities, etc. This issue is just beginning to be dealt with. It has not been solved.
But, and in fairness, it hasn't, and the president acknowledges that, although he clearly is more optimistic than you are that it's going to get settled. North Korea has suspended its nuclear bomb and missile tests for months. It has destroyed one of its main testing facilities. The two sides are talking at the highest level. Would you concede that President Trump has dramatically reduced tensions between the two countries?
Well, I think initially President Trump helped elevate the tensions. I mean, the fire and fury, the demeaning Twitters about Kim Jong Un, etc. I think the path of diplomacy that he's chosen is the wiser one. I commend him for that. But if the meeting itself, the summit, was a great victory for Kim Jong Un. He got the prestige of the first leader of North Korea to be literally embraced by the President of the United States. His sordid record on human rights, on mistreating his own people, was not only ignored, but frankly contradicted in many respects by the President's comments. The sanctions regime, which again the President, I think, and his staff did very well in putting it together, will dissipate given the lack of enthusiasm for enforcement. Guarantees about the security of North Korea, which the President seemed to imply is different than the maximum pressure campaign he's put on. And then conceding without any other quid pro quo the exercises that we conduct with the South Koreans was, I think, a mistake. Indeed, the President chose to call them provocative war games, which are not the case at all. So at the end of that summit, Kim Jong Un walked away, I think, with a great deal. And we're just now beginning to try to put it back together.
I just want to press on that one point. You're the top Democrat in the Senate Armed Services Committee. The president did agree to suspend joint military exercises between South Korea and the United States. He did, however, say that if North Korea drags its feet on denuclearization, he can always resume the game. So how big a deal is that?
It is a big deal. First of all, it was a complete surprise to our allies, the South Koreans and the Japanese. They are very concerned. Second, it is part of our determined not wargaming, but deterrence of the North Koreans. And if this goes for a long period of time, operationally we'll lose the skills that we need to collaborate with our colleagues in the region. And I think also it was interesting that the Chinese were among the first to report the cessation of these exercises, and I think they're going to take a great deal of comfort from that. So,
let me switch subjects
yes,
on you. President Trump announced Friday that he is imposing now finally not threatening, but imposing stiff new tariffs on China effective July 6th. Here he is.
We're just going to do $50 billion on $50 billion of high technology equipment and other things coming into the country.
China responded quickly that it is going to respond. It's going to retaliate with tariffs on U.S. farm products, on crude oil, on U.S. cars. Senator, are we now in a trade war with China?
It looks that way, but the president, I think, is right in calling out China. They have abused, in many respects, the free trade arrangements that have been built up over generations. They don't allow American companies to compete in China or international companies as they are allowed to in other countries. They have, I think, used the trade system to their advantage. So the president, I think, is right in taking action. The question is, are these actions coordinated I don't think so. I mean, before I left for the Singapore summit, he had a very, very difficult meeting with the G7. So he's not going into this trade battle with China with a unified effort by the Western powers. And then second, I think a lot of his judgments seem to be snap judgments. He imposed tariffs on countries aiming at China, and it wound up sort of hitting Canada and other countries where we have not only trade relationships but very strong national security relationships. So the concept, I think, is right to go after China. The methods I think he employs are just in many cases counterproductive. But to the trade war issue is could be dangerously approaching such a trade war.
I want to switch to one other subject, which is gaining interest and concern by the moment, and that is the issue of families at the border being separated. Let's put up some statistics. In the first 6 weeks after the administration launched its zero-tolerance policy, we now find out that 1,995 minors were separated from 1,940 adults coming across the border illegally. Here is President Trump's explanation.
That's the law, and that's what the Democrats gave us, and we're willing to change it today if they want to get in and negotiate, but they just don't want to negotiate.
Your reaction to the policy and the impact it's having in terms of separating these families?
It's not the law. It's the president's policy. In fact, he has stated, it's been reported in the press, that he's using it as a negotiation tool. He's using it to intimidate families so they don't come across the border. He's using it as a political ploy. So it's not the law. And to say it is the law is just misrepresenting the facts.
Let me ask you about two aspects of that. One, in terms of trying to deter families from coming across the border, they're coming across illegally. What's wrong with that?
We should have, and we've tried in the past on a bipartisan basis, to develop comprehensive immigration reform which would secure the border. We can't have a border that is open. But it also would recognize, one, individuals that are here for many years, and two, provide a much more effective process if people are seeking asylum, if people are trying legitimately to come into the United States. We have to protect our borders, but it is, I think, repugnant to most Americans when you have people like Dr. Franklin Graham condemning these family separations as abhorrent to the core American values.
Franklin Graham, the son of Billy Graham. Let me ask you about the other aspect of it, because it has been suggested, some people in the White House are saying this is a negotiating ploy, and the argument is that the president has suspended the DACA program, although the courts had stopped that, and he has imposed this policy to try to bring Democrats like yourself to the table to create a kind of grand bargain. Yes, he'll stop this policy, he'll provide some protection for the dreamers, but in return, you, the Democrats, will give him the border wall and limits on legal immigration, things like the visa lottery and chain migration.
I don't think Americans would like to see children 2 years old, 4 years old, torn away from their parents as a negotiating ploy in Washington, D.C. I think that's the American view of this. There are other ways to negotiate between Republicans and Democrats. Using children, young children, as political foils is abhorrent.
But are you saying that you will not agree to a deal that has this as an element in it?
I am just saying that this is repugnant to most Americans. And when you have leaders of the community leaders like Dr. Graham speaking out, that sends a strong, strong signal. There are ways we can negotiate. We had a few months ago, we thought a deal with the president with respect to some enhancement of border security, including stretches of the wall. In return, the DACA, the Dreamers, would be allowed to stay. At the last moment, that blew up. That was a fair, comprehensive, bargained negotiation, and he just sort of walked away from it. But to use children in this way, to me, is something that, frankly, that's not what we're about in this country.
Senator Reid, thank you. Thanks for coming in. Always good to talk with you, sir. Coming up.